one. The next topic for the day is e-business risk. And here transaction risk is a very important one. You will get it for 2 marks. No business gonna happen between them because there is a default data stored in the system and end-road is exposed to there are people who will actually dump their advertisement in your system. Hello everybody, a warm welcome to one and all. I'm Abhilash Chandra from the Department of Business Studies in Vidhyaashram PU College, the Temple of Excellence. Last session we understood about the different modes of business. Here we'll go with the next one. The next topic for the day is e-business risk. Students, traditional business or e-business risk is a factor. But what are the risks which we are actually going to discuss? Now I'll tell you, without risk, business is incomplete. So with the risk, business is like, yes, now it is called as a business. Now what exactly the business risk is all about? See, we have traditional business. What is our traditional business? We always go with buyer and seller. It's a place where we meet and all. Then we have a transaction. That is the business risk, right? What exactly the business risk is? That is, one arm length transaction is also a risk. And here online, it is like too much distance. Still there is something called risk. Now here, online transactions are not like arm length kind of a business. They're what? They're in two other ends. And that is what the prone to the number of risk. Example I'll give you here. Now in the traditional, what used to happen, there was a seller and a buyer. Let's go with this, right? There are two things. One is seller and another is a buyer. Now what usually happens in a traditional is, the seller will give the product, right? Now this is the product, and the buyer will give him the value for the product, that is the money. Now, if the product isn't good, the seller can go return it, right? Or the buyer can actually see to it what the seller is actually giving. But go with this. It's an online transaction. E-business is happening. When will the seller sell it? When will the buyer buy it? Now, in between whatever happens, will they meet? That is a question, right? Now, traditional business, there is a benefit. That is, I can touch, I can feel, I can see the real product. Touch, feel, see, and then I'll go with my value. And I'll tell you, you can bargain. What is that? A commerce student should always go with it. See, street vendors, right? Street vendors, peddlers, hawker, cheap jacks, what is that we usually do? We bargain with them. Yes or no? But the mall kind of a thing, again in traditional, do we bargain? The same way the question is, online shopping happens. Do you bargain? Whatever the price they have actually quoted, you are supposed to give the same thing. Now they would have given like this, 375 rupees. Now it is 350. What is that you will do? Save 25 rupees. What is that you will do? You will buy it. But reality, if the same thing was there in the traditional one, 375, probably I'll tell you, you would have bargained it for 250 or 300. So e-business risk is there. Yes, we will check what are the risks. There are 3 types of risk. I'll tell you there are too many risks, but in your syllabus we are supposed to restrict ourselves with 3 of the risks. The first one is transaction risk. Transaction risk. And here transaction risk is a very important one. You will get it for 2 marks as well as you will get it for 4 marks. So understand this transaction risk properly. Then you have something called the data storage. See, traditional risk, what happens is you go with the ledger, you write it, what is that person who have purchased, who have whatever it is. But data storage in a very huge volume, yes, there is a problem. So we'll check what exactly the data storage and transmission risk is all about. Then we have risk of threat to intellectual property. It's a new word, intellectual property, and I'll tell you what exactly intellectual property is, and privacy. There is a problem here. Anybody can access. So while you go with e-business, I'll tell you a few of the safety measures which you are supposed to take, so that the e-business risk, whatever we already know, that is a transaction, then you have data storage and transmission, then you have the risk of threat of intellectual property and privacy. You can minimize it. See, that's the beauty of risk. Risk can be minimized. What is it? Risk can be minimized. You can minimize it. Minimized. Right? Risk can be minimized. And transaction risk is very, very important. You are supposed to learn more about transaction risk because it's the 2 marks as well as the 4 marks here. Now let's go with the first one, that is a transaction risk. Now let's go with the same example here. We have the buyer and we have the seller. Now this is the e-business which gonna happen. Now buyer will place the order, seller will give the order, that is the product. Now the transactions happen here and the product will go to the buyer and the value will go to the seller. Now what happens here? Understand the transaction risk. The first thing is, here you have 3 of the different examples. What are the examples now? You had a buyer, then you have a seller. Now the process happens. Now the buyer will place his order. Right? Now seller will give, that is, he'll go for shipping the order. Done. Now what happens here is the transaction, that is transaction. Now transactions are happening. The first thing is, seller denies that. Who's that? The seller denies. Seller will deny. So from the seller, what happens? Seller denies that the customer ever placed the order. Or it's other way. Now customer, what happens? Customer denies that he ever placed the order. He ever placed the order. So what happens? This may be referred as the default on order taking or giving. Now what happened? There is a default. On what? On order taking or giving. Now this is what usually happens in the transaction. Both the parties are denying or one of the party will deny. That is what is a big example of a transaction risk. Transaction is going, but seller will deny or the customer will deny. No, that means what? There is no business going to happen between them because there is a default. A default on what? Default on placing an order or giving an order. So understand, giving an order, placing an order are the same. It is like taking the order or giving the order. So this is what happens in the transaction risk. So the next we have something called the other form of transaction risk. Now here transaction risk, I'll tell you, let's go with the same kind of an example here. We have the buyer and we have the seller. Now transaction should happen. Now we have something called here transaction. Okay, now understand the transaction risk here. Now buyer has placed an order, right, saying that in the month of November he needs his wedding suit, right? Now wedding suit he needs in the month of November. The seller will take the order, the seller will give the shipping, all it has happened. Now the seller is fine. But the problem is The buyer, he didn't get the product itself. Buyer has already paid the amount. Understand the transaction risk here. The problem here is what? Buyer have actually given the money and seller has given the product. Done. Transaction has happened, but the seller has sent it to the wrong address. What is it? It's a wrong address. Now that is what the transaction risk also says, that these are the situations which will normally it would have happened. So it's what? It's a transaction risk. Understand here. The intended delivery does not take place. What is it? The intended delivery does not take place. Goods are delivered. Yes, goods are delivered. Delivery of goods are done. But what exactly has happened? That is at a wrong address. At a wrong address, or goods other than the ordered may be delivered. Now, one of the example I gave you, right? That is wrong address. Another one, second one is what? He has asked for a suit. He actually got sari. Yes, probability is there. It has happened. I'll tell you why. The reason is the ignorance. The reason is what? The ignorance of it. Now, in the article in the month of October, that to October 17th, 2017, October 17, 2017, a British newspaper, they had actually given two couples, they had ordered for iPhone, that is a new iPhone version, and what exactly they have ordered is they want Apple phones, but they actually got two pair of apple, that is a fruit. Now what exactly it is, what they ordered, they didn't get it, but the Apple iPhone, what exactly the cost is, they have already given it to the seller. Now this is what happens, online transaction risk. That's why students, be very careful. Don't get bluffed by people who are already there to cheat others. So don't get bluffed, and don't buy costly products online. You are supposed to always go traditional and then go check, touch, feel, see, experience it, and then you are supposed to buy that. One more transaction risk is there. Now I'll tell you one more transaction risk, what exactly happens. Again, we'll have the same kind of a thing. We'll have the buyer, then we'll have the seller. Transaction is there. Buyer will place, seller will actually give. Done. Okay. Now, what usually happens here is seller does not get the payment. See, both the ways I told only about the buyer, what the buyer actually gets, right? Now what the seller actually gets, understand. The buyer would have actually said, the seller will give that. Now it is on cash on delivery. Let's go with it. Cash on delivery. Or any kind of payment. Let's go for an example. The seller has given the product. The product has reached the destination, and that to a correct destination. But the seller will claim that he didn't get the payment. Now payment, what the customer says is, I've already given. But the seller will not get payment. Again, it's a transaction risk, not for the buyer, but definitely for the seller. That's why if you are in the e-business, if any of your relatives are in the selling place, what is that you should do? Don't take orders more. You are supposed to go and then you are supposed to check whether the genuine person is there or not, because everywhere, see, even the buyers are very smart. Sometimes the sellers are only the buyers. So understand, they know all the logic. Business it is, right? Business is all about what? Cheating is talent. I'll tell you. I'll give you an example of this OLX. What is that we people have done, right? I'll give you an example of a random person who has already done this act in OLX. When OLX was started, It gave a very good offers. What is that offer? There is a buyer and there is a seller. There is a buyer and there is a seller. Okay. Now what exactly OLX did? For transportation of the second-hand goods, transportation of the second-hand goods. Now OLX, usually what happens is second-hand goods will actually be bought and sold. So one of the person, he went with his brain, he was very, very brainy, he knew what exactly commerce and the business is all about. OLX said all the transportation charges are free. Are what? Free. Now what happened? Usually what is that? The buyer will actually see the sofa. Let's go with an example of a sofa, right? Now seller has said he wants to sell his second-hand sofa. Now buyer saw that sofa and he wants to buy it. Now seller, he says it is 15,000. The buyer says, okay, I'm ready to pay 15,000. Now OLX transportation is what? Free. So he ordered for the sofa and he actually got the sofa. So transportation is all what? It's all free. Now try to understand the same example here. What that person did is, he had a new house. From the new house, right? Sorry, from the old house, he was supposed to transport all his furnitures to the new house. What did he do? Whatever was there in the old house, he put it in the OLX, saying that I want to sell it, and he quoted his own prices. In the next mobile, that is his wife's mobile, what he did was, he ordered all the furnitures from his wife's mobile. Then what happened? All the furniture went to the new house. Now what is it? OLX say transportation is all free. So what happened? Transportation also was done by whom? OLX. Try to understand. People are very smart. If you feel that you are the smartest, no. There is always a person who is smarter than you. So be like that. So here, transaction here is what? The seller. Try to understand. Even there are chances where sellers are also cheated by the buyers. Right? These are the examples which you are supposed to know. So seller does not get payment for the goods supplied, whereas the customer claims that the payment was made. The customer feels what? The payment is made. This may be referred as the default on payment. What we call this as? We call this as default of payment. This is what is called as default of payment. Please understand these things, students, right? Next we have data storage and transmission risk. Yes, there is a problem for the data storage. Information is power indeed. Information is actually a power indeed, right? Now here what happens, but think for a moment, if the power goes into the wrong hands, this is what happens. If it goes, all your data, all your kind of information, if it is in a safe hand, it is fine, it is good. You would have seen the Facebook, how they actually trialed in their lawsuits. We got to know that Mark Zuckerberg, he said, yes, I have compromised the data of my own customers. I've compromised the data of my users to different people. See, how is that you will get a Vodafone call though you have a Airtel has your mobile number? How did Vodafone people got your number? That means your data is actually leaked. Now, why will somebody tell that, sir, you are actually in the stock exchange, you are actually playing it? How did they got to know? Now, you went with some other thing. Your data is already what? Leaked. So it is that a very, very big risk. And I'll tell you, students, you should never go with your information to other people, because you should always maintain something called privacy. Now here, it goes to a wrong hand. What happens is data stored in the system and en route is exposed to the number of risk. I'll tell you, students, anybody can hack. E-business is not free from hacking. A hacker is always there to cheat you. We call that has so many other kind of a business are there. We'll give you more examples, right? But what is that you should do is, you should always think what you are doing. Somebody is definitely there who is watching, right? So understand that. Next one is risk of threat to what? To intellectual, what is it? Intellectual property and privacy. What exactly it is? Data furnished in the course of online, whatever it is, the transactions may be supplied. It can be supplied to others who may start dumping a host of advertising. See, you would have seen whenever you go with your YouTube or you go with any of the online kind of a thing, how is that the advertisement comes in between? So what usually happens is there are people who will actually dump their advertisement in your system. So how it is all because of risk of threat. There is a risk of threat. And what happens is promotional literature into your email box. When you open your email box also, what happens is somebody is dumping. The reason is you will not have privacy at all. So you should always go with these type of risk, students. If there is a privacy, it is very good. If you don't have privacy, people are just dumping the advertisement to your system. Pop-ups will definitely come. So what exactly it is? It's not good. It is the risk which you have actually created because you are using more and more e-business form. So thank you so much. If you have not understood, you know what exactly you are supposed to do, Abhilash sir and Vidhyaashram is always there to help you. What exactly we want, we are there to do it only for the students who want to study and pursue in their life. Until then, students, I'll see you when I see you.